It's not every day that I have the opportunity to talk with someone who presented at the United Nations or was given a Medal of Honor from the President of the United States. But my guest today addressed the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations in March, and a month earlier was honored by the President. I will talk with Susan Troth, Associate Professor of Worship at Cedarville University, about these experiences on today's Cedarville Stories Podcast. Hi, I'm Mark Weinstein. Today's guest has enjoyed a whirlwind 2025 with those opportunities, as well as becoming a best-selling author. Let me welcome Susan Troth to this week's Cedarville Stories Podcast. Susan, you've had quite a season of life recently, from receiving a medal from the President of the United States to speaking at the United Nations in March. First of all, congratulations on both of those. Those are quite honorable events. So how do you put into words these two significant events and honors? It's quite amazing.
Amazing is a great word for it. It's surprising. And I think I'm just reminded so many times God does amazing things, surprising things in surprising places, cornfields, with surprising people. Yeah. And my late husband used to say, and it's in my book, he draws straight lines with crooked sticks.
Oh, that's great.
And, I'm a crooked stick. We're all crooked sticks. And that is to the glory of God that he loves us and uses us and continues to bring opportunities and open doors our way.
Yeah, and since the fall of man, we've all been crooked sticks,
Amen.
haven't we?
That's right, yeah.
So it's amazing that he does eventually more than we even think or imagine. So I want to dig deeper into your two events that we're going to talk about today. But I think it's important to begin with context and really the underlying reason why these happen. And it all comes out of personal hardships in your life. What were some of the difficult challenges that led you to volunteering, led you to writing a book, led you to speaking at the United Nations? What was going on in your life that led you this path?
Well, as a young woman, I was diagnosed with with endometriosis and other things. And so that started my late husband and I down a path of 10 years of fertility treatments. Okay. And tremendous financial hardship, emotional hardship. Things weren't covered by insurance back then.
That was a commitment by you guys.
Yes. And just a real, shock. It hadn't been in the family or anything. I mean, we had kids' names ready and were ready to go down the road, but instead we were doing this medical road. And also he was serving as a senior pastor and I was his minister of worship. And so all of those ministry stresses. And we had drawn the line for us ethically at a place that when we got there and the doctor said there's nothing else to do, it'd been 10 years and we'd done everything we could and we're pretty wiped out in every way. And so then heading down the adoption road at that point in life wasn't immediately something my husband was ready to do. We started kind of talking about fostering and even doing that. And then God was changing our path in the ministry. Yeah. And so that was tremendously difficult. And it was also, looking back, I learned early the discipline of surrender. And I talk in the book, I used to just say, before I ever knew any results of any test, I would just say, God, I love you. I don't know what this result is, but that's okay. I'm going to love you. Not because I feel it right now, but because I just want to be disciplined to let you know that. And so that was, and I didn't, we didn't take the time. I didn't take the time to grieve that. That kind of came out later. So, that was difficult years and ministry years. And then all of a sudden we knew he had a heart condition, but his dad had died at 60. So that was kind of the magical number for us to get past. Yes. And then all of a sudden he was walking the dog at 53. He'd had open heart surgery at, I think it was 49. But and God just took him instantly, and that was an answered prayer, that he didn't suffer or anything. But so then I was a widow at 54, and so that was just a tremendous. I'm alone.
Right.
I'm in Ohio. There's no kids. There's no family around me.
So you say you're in Ohio, obviously, because of Cedarville. But where are you from originally then? Where were you guys from originally?
So I'm a Texan. My late husband was a Texan. The rest of my family, they're Floridians. I was sovereignly ordained by God to be 7 generations of Floridians.
And here you
and
are
I'm
in
the
Ohio.
Texan. So yeah, I mean, from down south, my family's all south, and his family was in Texas. So closest family for me was in Nashville.
Okay.
And Ronnie had always said, if anything happens to me, you should probably go to Nashville. And I was like, yay, Music City.
You would like that.
Oh, man, I wanted that. But I knew that big events like that, you shouldn't make a decision fast. So
Right.
I knew that in wisdom, I would wait. And so I waited almost exactly a year. I was back at Cedarville because he died the day classes started.
Oh,
So it was in August. I was back the next year, and I was depressed, and I was driving around Cedarville. I just finished getting ready for classes, and I parked actually in the neighborhood where I now live. And I was just sitting there real quiet, and I felt God remind me. He said, "Do you remember when I brought you here? It wasn't just for then; it was for now." And I was like, "Oh, I remember that story. Yeah, you really moved some things in my life, and okay."
Yeah.
I'm staying. God, if you want me to stay, I'm alone. That's fine.
You don't know why, but you're going to do it.
I'm staying.
How long ago was that Ronnie passed?
It was 2017. So what is that? It'll be 8 years in August.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you teach that year?
I
Or
did.
did you try to teach that year?
I did, and the school was so gracious. So God knew that I needed this community here for this time because, Beth Porter and Roger O'Neill and the whole music and worship department, I think I had at least 2 months that they said, take care. And I know widows who've only been given 3 days.
Yeah.
There's so many stories of hardships out there that I've run into now. And so just an amazing ministry to me from the Cedarville community. And then Ronnie was a pastor at First Baptist Fairborn.
Right.
And as a widow and as a pastor's wife, there's triggers with you're a trigger, the church is a trigger. So I stayed there until I finished my first school year, and then I went to Florida to visit family. And I knew when I came back, I'd probably need to just switch churches, just emotionally. And,
Sure.
and so God said stay, and so I visited Grace Baptist Church here, and I moved my membership there.
That's where you are.
Yeah.
So if that's not enough, you had other issues. In fact, you had a near-death experience.
I
Tell
did.
us about that.
So I dug in deep. After 2017, man, I went deep into. I got a private Christian counselor and books, and group counseling and grief share and any program to help me get healthy. And I was just really trying to dig in and staying close to God. And it's 2019 in the fall. And I was like, wow, I feel like, God's really restored my soul, just like he says in Psalm 23. I feel good, still kind of young, never expected that I would marry again. But, God, if that's even on the table now that I feel healthy, that's back on the table.
I remember talking to you when you were seeing this guy, and you said that you may have met your Boaz.
Yes,
I remember you telling me that.
I did. That's another amazing story. So it was 2019, and I was just really feeling restored. And that December, it was right around December 31, I went to urgent care, and they diagnosed bronchitis. And 5 days later, I was rushed to the ICU with renal failure and sepsis and double pneumonia. And man, the potter smashed the clay. And I was just right on the edge of death. And I remember laying in the ICU, and my neighbors came to pray for me, and my department and friends. And I was thinking, oh, wow, God, this is quite a shock, because I'd really kind of put Humpty Dumpty back together again. But I'm ready. I mean, my estate plan is done, literally just finished, and okay, if this is your will for me to go to heaven, I'm pretty shocked, but I'm ready. And then literally from the edge of death, I didn't walk out of the hospital. I was wheeled out.
Sure.
And then I was walking with a cane. And the last thing the lung doctor said, and that's an amazing story, because it was a doctor that had done Ronnie's open heart surgery. And he rarely, if ever, does rounds at Soin. But he had been sent to Soin that day to fill in and was put on my case. And he remembered me, and he really watched over me. And he was the last doctor. He stuck his head and he said, "We decided not to do surgery on your lungs. You're going to have to move." And I was like, okay. So literally I wore a mask before anybody else did.
Sure.
Went to the field house with my cane, and I was shuffling like I was just barely one, but I just shuffled and did, and started that way and just started building. But I was angry. I was isolated.
Yeah.
I was so angry with God. And for about 3 weeks, there was no prayer. There was just anger and isolation. And then I realized I didn't want to stay that way.
Okay.
And my nephew, who's now a pastor in the area at First Fairborn, he's like, "Aunt Susan, I know there's something going on." He said, "God is sovereign, and he has the right to touch any part of our lives at any time he wants to." I said, "You're right." And I just surrendered. And I said, "I love you, God, no matter what." And just the healing that happened. And that last crushing also was just a final, and through the end, I think it was more grieving everything.
Yeah.
Infertility that I'd never grieved.
Right.
And just everything else that was just kind of dumped down there, that kind of gets stuck in the bottom of our basement of emotions and bitterness and things like that. Just God allowed it to all come up, and I just said, "I surrender." And it was amazing.
I think, obviously you're a little bit younger than me, but I think us growing up, we didn't know how to grieve.
Yes.
Never learned it, learned to lament. So you learned it at a later age.
I did.
Can you speak to in a practical way, about how you felt healed once you surrendered? What did that feel like? What did that look like? Because some people are dealing with a lot of things, even listening to this podcast, they're dealing with stuff. So
it's stopping wrestling with God. It's, we can always be honest with God, but the weight of fighting with God and wanting answers and demanding answers, and we can ask God, but, he's not always going to answer us, and that's okay. We can lament and be honest, but the surrender that says life does not have to be my way.
Mm-hmm. But that's foreign to at least our American culture, because life is always about us.
That's
isn't
right.
It?
That's right.
So that's a good lesson. So that's the backstory to really what led you to write Stress to Spless, which Spless, I think, is a made-up word, right?
Yes.
Talk to us about the book and how you hope it's going to help others. And tell us a little bit about the book.
And that's a crazy, Spless. Who does that? I even with my interview with you, people started asking me how you're doing. And I said, it just kind of blurted out, I feel splessed. I wanted a word that went beyond blessed, because splessed is so blessed by God, I feel spoiled, but it's not because of outward things. It's on the inside. It's wiped clean. It is peace and a cleansing and a renewed heart and a restored life, and inwardly, not because of everything that's going on the outside. It's just a relationship with my Heavenly Father. And so, so blessed by God, I feel spoiled. And that word it kind of grew in my heart. And then I started thinking, I am kind of getting close to retirement, and I want to retire to ministry. I want to retire to something. And I met with Dr. Carrie Oberbrunner in our...
He's a full...
Oh my goodness, what
energy.
A blessing he is to us and to everyone. And I said, Carrie, I think I can sell mugs on Amazon. He said, I think you need to talk to a friend of mine who's a coach. And that was a shock to me. And Rick and I prayed about it, and I feel like God's telling Carrie advice to give me. I'm going to follow that. And I met with a business coach, and I told her my story, and I heard her typing, and she said, Susan, I think you have a book, and I think there's actually an acronym in the word SPLEST. And we started talking, and we spent an hour. And it's been amazing how God has, way beyond my gifting, but bringing people around me. He's brought prayer warriors into my life. And this word SPLEST makes an incredible journey of healing, because I've done different grief programs, and they'll get to surrendering to God's sovereignty toward the end, or they'll mention God's sovereignty, but really not go to, you've got to surrender. And so that's the beginning of SPLEST. It all starts with our relationship with God.
Okay.
And so that's the SPLEST journey. And that's how the word grew into an acronym, from talking with Carrie and then this coach. And then the book just kind of started pouring out, because that conversation started in July, and the book was written by October.
July of what year?
This year. No, last year.
2024.
2024.
Yeah, so I would have thought it would have been fairly recently, because Carrie's only been with the university for over a year or so. Mm-hmm. And that's a great contact for you to make. Mm-hmm. So for everyone who's experienced grief in their life, and who hasn't experienced some kind of grief, isolation can be a common occurrence. You experienced that a little bit. Take us through your darkest moments, Susan, and how God met you in your grief, and how you take those lessons to try to help others. Mm-hmm.
I love how the Bible shows us others and other heroes of the faith that have dark moments. And the Bible doesn't say, no, you can't feel and you can't weep, and that the dark moments happen, and there were lots of times where, as a widow, I was by myself, and I was just weeping and wailing, and I journaled a lot, because emotions are a gauge. Emotions tell us, we feel something very strong.
Right.
They're not supposed to be our guide. That can get us into trouble.
Right.
Yes. And that's actually in the book. But God meeting us and lament, allowing us, lament is its own journey, where we can be honest with God,
right, and
yet we remember and hold on to His truth, and then we trust Him as we move forward. So the dark times can be opportunities to really lean into God and to trust in Him.
At the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned that you were honored by President Biden in Atlanta, and then also obviously your United Nations. We're going to get that in a minute, but let's focus on the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award back in 2024. How did that come about? And because I understand that partly, maybe fully, that you put in over 4,000 hours of volunteer time what kind of volunteering did you do? And speak to that a little bit. Speak about volunteering, but then take us through the ceremony and being honored.
So when I was nominated for this, and I was asked to kind of write down, summarize my volunteering, it's really, my family has a very volunteer mentality. My great-grandparents were they go back to Salvation Army.
Okay.
I mean, I've heard my great-grandparents, I believe, maybe even met William Booth, but
really?
On my mom's side of the family, I still have distant cousins that are in the Salvation Army. And so our family's just always been somebody needs help, go, and so from even as a teenager, mission trips, and I've worked disaster relief, and I've just volunteered at nursing homes, even throughout college, and just more mission trips. I'm doing a Go mission trip in Germany. I'm taking a team from here in May. I just think it was really hard for me to define it because it's just kind of in the DNA of our family and what we all kind of tend to do. So
were you volunteering primarily in the Dayton region, or what kind of projects would you serve?
It's been throughout my ministry. Florida was the disaster relief when a hurricane came through, and I can't even remember it now.
There's so many.
I know, know. And then in Houston. We had hurricanes there, and so just always, wherever we were, opportunities to volunteer.
Okay. Did you find that serving others during crisis, or however these volunteer opportunities unfolded, how did that minister to you, and how did that maybe help you heal, even though you may not even realize you needed to be healed?
It always makes you grateful. For everything that God has done for you. It makes you grateful that you can be a steward. I mean, really a big resonator in my life is being a steward. It's not my money. It's not my house. We just left to go out of town for spring break and let someone borrow our house who needed to come here for a speech tournament.
Oh, really? Okay.
So it's just that try to have a real hands-off. And so when you're reaching out to people, it can make you very thankful that you are able to reach out to and able to help.
Okay. So back to the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award. What was that ceremony like for you and your family, whoever was there with you?
My family came, and it was in downtown Atlanta. And they had multiple award recipients and a dinner and kind of a photo area that we could have. And it was really kind of simple. I mean, it is from a volunteer arm of our government, so it wasn't over the top glitzy or anything. Okay. It was just a real simple, fun evening of being able to meet people. And I told my story a little bit as I received the award and photography. And it was a real fun weekend with the family, a great time to meet people.
So anyone of note that you were able to meet? I don't think the president was there, right?
He was not, no. I think they do a couple of these around the country. Okay. They have to be recognized by the president and AmeriCorps to be able to present these. Okay. Yeah.
So in our final moments today on the podcast.
Are we already at final moments?
Well, we still have a few more minutes. Yeah.
It's flown by.
Time flies by. But in our final few questions, let's pivot to your speech at the United Nations. Your speech, I believe, was called A Bedrock of Hope in a Digital Age, and it was built on the acronym HOPE, H-O-P-E. Walk us through what each part means of hope.
Right. And so HOPE is the end of the SPLEST acronym. So SPLEST is S, surrender to God, P, permission to grieve, and we'll learn about lament, L, leaning into truth, E, emotions are a gauge, not a guide, SS is the listening to the still small voice of God, which comes from his word and other things. And then the next E is endurance. And then the final D is discovering hope. And actually, I wrote this acronym just before COVID hit when Grace Baptist women were going to ask me to speak at a women's event. And then it got shut down for COVID. And it had just been sitting in my drawer in the file. And then I started writing this chapter and put it in there. But hope, the bedrock that never gives way, no matter what comes. We build our lives on the Holy Bible.
Yeah.
O is obedience. So it's a big problem when you say, I know what the Bible says, but it's like reading directions to put a bike together and you just read the directions, put it down, and then you assemble the bike and you wonder why it's not riding quite right because you didn't really assemble it according to the directions. Right. So obedience is incredibly important. And then prayer is the P. And then E is endurance. Okay. And the beautiful thing about endurance is that the Bible tells us that God equips us. He strengthens us with endurance.
So what's really neat, and we talked about this before we started to record, is when you presented at the United Nations, each person there, I believe, received a gift bag.
They did.
And in that gift bag, what did you give them?
So there were 2 gift bags. There was a VIP gift bag. So they asked me to bring 10 books. So I had 10 books that went out into gift bags. But our print shop, they said, oh, you can put pens or something in all the other gift bags. And I'm like, can I do a mini book? And look what our print shop did here at Cedarville University. I took 2 chapters from the book, including at the end a salvation prayer, the gospel and a salvation prayer. And this cute little mini book went into all the other gift bags. And then the time allotted for us got a little discombobulated because the people before us were late leaving the room, and 3 speakers didn't get to speak.
Really?
And yes, not fun, because they had 2 panels, and then they had a keynote speaker. And I thought, oh, I'm going to sit here, and I'm not going to. I saw the time going by, and then all of a sudden she called me up. In my 3.5 TED Talk speech, she said, you have 1 minute.
Really?
So I'm so thankful because my Cedarville students, I teach private voice lessons all day. So I had practiced my speech probably 11 times. I'd grab students as they finished their lessons. I'm like, okay, sit on my couch. You got 3 minutes. So I very quickly just took the main elements of the speech and did it. And I even had a couple of women come up to me afterwards talking about it. So even though it got shortened, it didn't lose the core.
No.
And I got to hope, and I had a rock with me, because I tell people to take it and it's the bedrock.
Yeah.
Put it in your garden or a container and remember what it is. And she said, I want a rock. So I gave her the rock out of my pocket.
Okay.
And I don't know what countries. I know we had a lot from Nigeria, some from Cameroon. It was really neat seeing all the countries in the room.
How many people attended that?
There were probably around 50 in our breakout room.
Okay. And to get to be selected as a speaker isn't a small feat. You had to go through some hoops. Tell us about what you had to do to be selected.
And once again, I was scared. I was being a speaker. I can do a 45-minute PowerPoint at conferences all day, but you tell me a TED Talk and 3.5 minutes. And fortunately, my coach helped me, because there's they don't want you selling product. They want you to go on a journey in 3.5 minutes, and she helped me write it. And then I had to jump through 2 hoops. First, I had to present it to Dr. Edna Frenchwood, who'd asked me to speak, and she did kind of the first cuts, and one fell off at that point, one speaker that was in my group doing it. And then the next time it was for a TED Talk coach. And by that time, another speaker had fallen off, and the TED Talk coach said it was good. He approved it. And so they wanted me to fine tune it just a little bit more. And then I had to fine tune it one more time, send them a video clip, and then it was finally done. And man, God really stretched me, because if you would have told me a month ago I'd given a 3.5-minute TED Talk, I would say, no way, that's not me.
So that's all memorization?
Yes. And the memorization, I memorized things for songs, so that helped. But at my age, memorization doesn't come easy, and it's a little scarier than it used to be.
Right.
But the students were great. And they piled in my office one after the other and let me practice on them, and they gave me feedback. Yeah.
So my final question is going to be a 2-part question. So what do you hope, I will say pardon the pun, but maybe not. What do you hope comes from your TED Talk at the United Nations, short-term and long-term? And then what's next for Susan Troth?
Well, I met another young woman that was there. She was on a panel, and we had dinner afterwards. And she's from Atlanta, and she said, I have a ministry to women who've been abused, and I'd like to reach out to you. And I shared my contact information about maybe being able to help. And the book is actually, I've launched an online group coaching ministry out of the book. And we're just finishing our first kind of cohort, and that's been cool. And I've written a study guide that takes every chapter from the SPLES, from the acronym, and takes a person in the Bible, and we dig a little deeper, like surrender is about Job, and Paul is endurance, and so we're fixing to, you hear that Southern
You're
there?
a Southern lady there.
Fixing to publish the study guide, and then maybe church groups, could use that and continue the online coaching, possibly speaking as God opens up doors. I'm always surprised.
I think the Lord's preparing you for your post-Cedarville career, and you're going to have a big impact in the lives of many people. So for those watching or listening, they want to get in contact with you. They want to, find your book. They want your help. They want hope. How do people reach out to you?
Thank you. Probably the easiest way is susantroth.com. And so that has all kinds of links for contacting me. I'm on Instagram, but susantroth.com, there's plenty of links there to connect with me.
Susan, I want to thank you for joining me this week on the podcast. I mean, I'm talking to our guests who are watching and listening. This is normal for Cedarville faculty to really impact and build into the lives of people. And so you're a great role model for all of us. And I wish you well in your future, wherever the Lord leads. And again, thanks for joining me this week on the podcast.
Thank you. And I'm glad God kept me at Cedarville.
We are too. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Cedarville Stories Podcast, brought to you by Cedarville University. Be sure to come back next week when we'll share another Cedarville story for God's glory.